There are two things you can do with treasure. You can hide it, you can hunt it. And people do and have done both things for centuries here in the Cook Islands. Today we're going to dig up the treasures hidden here in the Cook Islands, as well as follow the stories of some of the often eccentric pioneers who have set out here and fallen in love with these treasure islands. Islands that Robert Louis Stevenson's wife described in 1890 as the most romantic in the world. Let's start with an overview of the islands, hidden treasures in their own right. The Cook Islands are 15 islands scattered across 2 million square kilometres in the South Pacific. Generally grouped as a 9-island southern group and a 6-island northern group, all but 2 of the Cook Islands are inhabited. 237 square kilometres, or 91.4 square miles of land, and almost 2 million square kilometres, or 750 square miles of ocean. About half the size of Curaçao by landmass, but 3 times the size of Texas once its exclusive economic zone is factored in. The Cook Islands are home to a population of 20,200 people, though only 15,000 are estimated to be currently living on the islands. To give an idea of how small the population of these islands is, in practical terms, in the third quarter of 2023, there were only 56 babies born in the entire country. In the same period, only 26 people passed away. There are probably more people who've accidentally put salt in their coffee instead of sugar today. And it's a pretty rare treat to visit these hidden treasure islands. In 2023, only 10,368 international visitors set foot in the Cook Islands. Now, granted, that's the equivalent of half the population of the country, but put another way, that's 0.0000128% of the global population. More people become millionaires from winning a lottery in a year than visit the Cook Islands. Congratulations. Talking of visiting the Cook Islands, the first European to spot these islands was the Spanish navigator Álvaro de Mendaña, a prolific explorer who has become somewhat forgotten by history. Álvaro de Mendaña was the first European to discover several South Pacific islands, including the Solomon Islands and the Marquesas. A few years later, in 1606, a fellow Spanish explorer, actually Portuguese but sailing under the Spanish flag, became the first European to land on the islands. Pedro Fernández de Quiros was so taken with the friendliness and beauty of the native Polynesian tribespeople that he named the island Gente Hermosa, beautiful people. That island today is Puka Puka. That was 1606, long before Captain James Cook arrived on the scene. Cook arrived in 1773 and again in 1777, but he didn't call the island the Cook Islands. He named them the Harvey Islands in honour of the British Lord of the Admiralty. Perhaps surprisingly, the Cook Islands were given their present name by a French-speaking Russian admiral of German heritage, Adam Johann von Krusenstern, in his atlas L'Océan Pacifique. Despite bearing his name for some 200 years, Captain Cook only ever stepped foot on one of the 15 Cook Islands, the tiny and uninhabited Palmerston Atoll. Well, I say uninhabited, but we'll come back to that in a bit. The Cook Islands became a British protectorate in 1888 due to fears that the French might occupy the territory like they had in Tahiti. And 12 years later, islanders presented a petition requesting that the islands be annexed as a British territory. The islands became a dominion of the British Empire in October 1900, and the following year were packaged in with the colony of New Zealand for somewhat local management. Well, the boundary change of the 11th of June 1901 can still be felt today, with the New Zealand dollar being one of the 2 official currencies of the Cook Islands. But the Cook Islands are not a part of New Zealand today. Well, they are, and they're not. In 1962, the New Zealand government presented the legislature of the Cook Islands with 4 options to vote on: complete independence, self-government, integration into New Zealand, or integration into a larger Polynesian federation. And the decision was made that the Cook Islands would take the self-government option. What this means is that we're not technically visiting a new country when you visit the island of Rarotonga. You're visiting a self-governing territory of New Zealand. The Cook Islands are a politically independent territory that remains under New Zealand sovereignty. The King of New Zealand, King Charles, is head of state. New Zealand is responsible for ensuring the Cook Islands' protection militarily, and New Zealand represents the Cook Islands at the United Nations. Citizens of the Cook Islands are citizens of New Zealand and have full access to a New Zealand passport. But New Zealand has no authority to impose any laws on the Cook Islands. So that's a brief history of the islands and how they both are and aren't a country. But I promised you some eccentric explorers, so here goes. I'd like to introduce you to a man who survived for a decade completely alone on the isolated Suwarrow, and another who arrived accidentally on a solo rowing trip. But first, I'd like you to meet a man who set out to create his own dynasty on Palmerston. William Masters loved the Cook Islands, almost as much as he loved wives. And he really loved wives. He married his first wife, Charlotte Farmer, in Leicestershire, in the UK. He was 20, she was 18, and she was great, the poster child for wives. There had been a try before you buy promotion in Leicestershire that year, and Charlotte was quite heavily pregnant on their wedding day, giving birth to their first child, a son, 2 months after tying the knot. Whether William Masters had ever intended to marry Charlotte, or whether circumstance pushed the ring onto her finger, they went on to have a second child, a daughter this time. And William was really getting into this whole wife idea, so he thought he might like another one. William Masters headed out to sea, taking work on whaling ships. He spent a fair amount of time in the Bay of Islands at the north end of New Zealand, but in the end, ship life became too much for him, and the ship logbooks record that he jumped ship at Penryn, also known as Tongareva, the northernmost of the Cook Islands. He was found on the island entirely destitute, according to the logbook of the schooner Harai, and was offered, along with his woman, her sister, and 1 or 2 children, the possession of Palmerston Island for and on behalf of Mr. John Brander, the Scotsman who owned the ship. Masters was to be paid for his work as the island's live-in caretaker, with a share of the produce raised on the island. There were a few people who lived on the island already, but certainly not many, perhaps a couple of dozen. A few natives, another foreign man living with his son, and the beginnings of the Palmerston clan. Now here was where the story gets juicy. Masters was tasked with making coconut oil to export to Tahiti by Brander. Brander, the Scotsman, happened to be married to a Tahitian princess. And the first few years went well. Masters sent his coconut oil back on the regular ships that would visit the island, and in the meantime set about marrying some of the available women. Well, the first of his 4 Palmerston wives was of royal blood, a daughter of the royal household in Penryn. Her name was Akakaingaro, or Sarah to William, and together they had 9 children. His second Palmerston wife, otherwise known as his third wife, let's not forget poor Charlotte, gave William a further 6 children. Wife number 2, or 3, Tapu Tinoi, had a cousin, and her cousin, Matavia, was really beautiful, and although she was already committed to another man, she felt she had enough emotional availability to embrace a second marriage. Thankfully, so too did William Masters, because he didn't yet have a third or fourth wife. He'd considered putting an ad in the Lonely Heart section of the newspaper, but a chance meeting at a family gathering rendered that approach unnecessary. Matavia married William in the 1890s, and together they increased the population of Palmerston by another 7. To complete his family, for he didn't yet have a fourth, or is it fifth, don't forget Charlotte, William Masters took a young lady called Arathita to be his potentially unlawfully wedded wife, and she gave him one final daughter. As his family grew, William Masters, of course, needed a house large enough to provide shelter for his dynasty, and so, using the assorted timbers of shipwrecked vessels, he built something of a monumental structure. And he must have been a good handyman, because his family palace was one of the only structures to survive a pretty hefty hurricane that powered through the region in 1926. And you'll never guess where he built his house for his literal handful of wives and 25 children. He built it next door to the church. Well, to draw a long story to a slightly shorter close, William Masters felt that he had put so much of himself into this island of Palmerston that really it ought to be his. Brander, the coconut oil-loving husband of a Tahitian princess, who had first granted Masters custodianship of the island, had long since died, and so Masters felt it was time that his investment in the island was formally recognised in the form of ownership. On January the 6th, 1888, William Masters wrote a letter to the governor of Fiji, who at the time was the British representative in the region, with the following request. I wish to apply to you about the possession of Palmerston Island, as I wish to claim it as my own. He tells the governor of the 200,000 coconut trees that he planted on the island at his own expense, and he rounds off his petition for Palmerston with reference to his family. It will be a great pity to drive my children away from the island, as it is the only home they got. And after a lengthy legal battle, which ultimately became a multi-generational battle, the New Zealand Parliament officially amended the Cook Islands Act in 1954, bestowing legal ownership of pretty much 90% of Palmerston to Masters and his descendants. Okay, so from a prolific polygamist who attempted to populate an entire island with the fruit of his loin, let's go to the total opposite end of the spectrum. Let's meet a recluse who fell undeniably in love with the beauty of the Cook Islands, who had no doubt in his mind that he had discovered heaven on earth and loved every minute of being able to hear nothing but the true sounds of nature. The man who inadvertently inspired the hit TV shows Survivor and, for British audiences, Shipwrecked, which both asked the question, could you survive on a desert island? Well, Tom Neill could. And he did, for over a decade. Even today, Suwarrow is deserted. It's served by no commercial flights, and it's not on any commercial shipping route either. Private yachts make the occasional appearance, but this really is one of those rare, truly deserted, paradisical islands. Since 1978, the entire island of Suwarrow in the northern group has been protected as a National Heritage Park and bird sanctuary. And if you ever want to make a visit, you need special permission from the Cook Islands government before you drop anchor. Underneath this idyllic white sand-skirted island are millions of dollars of treasures from centuries of shipwrecks. In the mid-19th century, the captain of a Tahitian ship uncovered a rusted iron chest anchored to the seabed not far from the shore. Upon further inspection, the chest contained gold and silver coins that would be valued today at about $1 million. And there's definitely more treasure out there. In 1876, Henry Mayer from New Zealand discovered another sand-smothered box with jewellery, brooches, coins. But unable to carry his loot back, he reburied and wrote a note for himself. Well, unfortunately, Henry found himself clubbed to death before he could collect his winnings, so it might still be there, somewhere. But for some, the island itself is the treasure. And one of these desert island dreamers earned himself the nickname the Hermit of Suwarrow. Tom Neill, a sailor originally from Wellington, New Zealand, fell in love with the Pacific Islands because of what he described as the pace of life which you feel God must have had in mind originally when he made the sun to keep us warm and provided the fruits of the earth for the taking. For what added up to a total of 15 years over a total of a 25-year period, Tom Neill lived totally alone on the island of Suwarrow with just himself and nature for company. He learned how to survive totally apart from the rest of the world, how to fend for himself, and how to appreciate the smallest miraculous details of this planet we call home. He wrote a book about his experience called An Island to Oneself, which has become something of a cult classic for Robinson Crusoe-esque dreamers. But even by his own admission, this heavenly existence was far from straightforward. At his longest stretch, Tom went 2 years without seeing another human. I haven't even had a cup of tea on my own for days. I really don't know how he does it. Actually, there's a lot I can't personally understand about Tom Neill's drive to exist alone on a desert island. And it comes back to what I said at the beginning. There are two things you can do with treasure: hunt it or hide it. I get the hunting part, that bit's fun. That's why we travel. It's why we're almost irresistibly drawn to other people, to hear their stories, their gossip, their tips, their lessons for life. That's treasure. And physical treasures are exciting too. I get all that. But hiding treasure, that I don't get. There's little more potent in driving a person to insanity than trying to hide something. Treasure, secrets, whatever that might be. And that's a darker side of the Cook Islands. These secretive islands, hidden like inclusions in the giant sapphire that is the Pacific Ocean. Hidden to provide cover for a lot of secrets. A lot of paranoia and self-created over-the-shoulder nervous twitching finds its hidden home here. You probably know of the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, and the British Virgin Islands as havens for secretive offshore bank accounts. Well, there is nowhere better to hide assets than the Cook Islands. Notoriously always just out of reach of overseas legal systems, the Cook Islands have proved themselves to be an excellently secure treasure trove for a wealthy international audience. Now, there can be plenty of perfectly legitimate reasons to store assets outside of the country you are officially a resident in, but there can also be many questionable motives for squirreling assets just out of reach. And the Cook Islands serves both audiences. Doctors looking to protect their assets from being seized in opportunistic legal claims, and doctors who aren't doctors. And in a sad end to Tom Neill's story, it was at the hands of one of these doctors who wasn't a doctor that he died. In 1977, being treated for cancer with apricot kernels by a doctor who had been incarcerated in a New Zealand prison during the years that he claimed to be studying at med school. There's a stubbornness to dreamers that isn't always in their best interests. But when it ends well, a dreamer's great achievement can be the inspiration for so many others. As our final story of an eccentric explorer in the Cook Islands, before we zoom in on our ports of call, I'd like to tell you about a rowing trip from Peru that went slightly off course. It was only a few years ago, in 2019, that a 24-year-old Australian, Tom Robinson, set out to become the youngest person to row 8,500 nautical miles solo across the Pacific Ocean. His journey, in a boat that he had designed and built himself, started in Peru on the west coast of South America. He was supposed to finish his journey back at home in Australia. After 5 months, Tom was hoping to make sight of the Marquesas. But over the many nautical miles of his journey, he'd been swept off course, and so the land he actually saw was Penrhyn Island at the north of the Cook Islands, the same island that our multi-marital William Masters first jumped ship to in the 1860s. And after so long at sea, all alone just like Tom Neill on the island of Suwarrow, here's how Tom Robinson described that moment. This was my first taste of land in over 5 months. I greedily feasted my eyes and imagination on what was a sensory overload of natural beauty. Vegetation, sandy beaches, and shallow crystal clear water. Truly breathtaking. We passed a family heading the other way in their aluminium dinghy, bamboo fishing rods hanging over the stern. They waved at me with enthusiasm and grace. The tow continued past the eastern village, Tetautua, where many of the locals came out of their houses to wave as we went past. Instantly, I realized that this was going to be a special place. What struck Tom Robinson the most was the friendliness of the islands, the warmth of their welcome, their openness to sharing their treasure island with him. They even gave him a Penrhyn name, Mahuta Hoi Hoi Asanga, the warrior that has paddled from afar. On his blog detailing his experience of accidentally landing in the Cook Islands, Tom Robinson makes the following observation. For sure, everyone here could build bigger homes, fill them with more things, then claim to be better off. But thankfully, armed with a certain level of serenity, life here is good and simple. It's oh so easy to forget that beyond the horizon on the other side of the Pacific lies a world of competition, greed, and luxury for luxury's sake. I hear it often. The people of Penrhyn appreciate what they have. Life is good here. Everything is free. The fish, the coconuts, and the land. And it's true. It is the same ocean, but such a different pace of life. And what we consider as treasures are remarkably different too. For Tom Robinson, it took months at sea on his own to see these small islands for the huge welcome they can provide. I hope with a little inspiration from his adventure, we'll be able to experience the same enthusiasm for this treasure trove territory when we arrive too. So let's round off today's talk with a look ahead at 2 Cook Island ports of call. Aitutaki, one of the most stunning of the Cook Islands, and Avatiu on the main island of Rarotonga. Often referred to as Little Paradise, Aitutaki is known for its breathtaking lagoon. Not only is it considered to be the most beautiful in the country, but some people go as far as to say it is the most spectacular in the world. Approximately 1,780 people call Aitutaki home, and they spend their days fishing or tending to their taro, banana, or coconut crops. Church is a core component of life here, and locals will also join together for social gatherings and services centered around worship and faith. Evening sessions of traditional dance and music bring the whole community out for what's known as Island Nights. And we'll get a taste of that relaxed pace of life and strong sense of community as soon as we step foot in Aitutaki. The lagoon is the main attraction, with its crystal clear water, a dancing mirror to the sky, and an eyeglass to a colourful world of skating fish and dancing marine plants below the surface. You can take a lagoon tour in all manner of ways, whether you prefer snorkeling, swimming, or perhaps exploring some secluded sandbars. If you make your way out to One Foot Island with your passport, then you can also get a nice tourist stamp as proof of your adventuring spirit. The island, officially known as Tapuetau, is located within the lagoon of Aitutaki. It's about 5 miles or 8 kilometers from the main wharf, Rarotonga Wharf. So unless you're a true athlete, you'll probably enjoy this excursion as a gentle half-hour boat ride from the wharf. Other activities to keep an eye out for around the lagoon are kayaking, paddleboarding, and fishing. Oh, and when I say that the water in the lagoon is clear, I mean it. Seriously, on a day when the winds are down and the waters are still, it looks like the boats are literally flying over coral, or floating on the thinnest stretch of cling film. It doesn't look physically possible. And if all this talk of activities is making you tired, you could, of course, just chill out and relax. Lounging on the beach where you can soak in the sun and soak in those heavenly views is a top choice for this stunning island. The nearest beach to the cruise ship tender dock of Rarotonga Wharf is Urea Beach, which is about a 1 mile or 1.5 kilometre walk away. That works out at about a 20-minute walk. It's a good swimming beach. There are a few eating options around here as well. But if you fancy a little drive too, then head 3 miles, 5 kilometres up the road to Avatiu Beach. It's got beautiful soft white sand for sunbathing and is also a really great spot for some water sports like kayaking or paddleboarding, which you can rent from Ranganui's Retreat, which is just around the corner from the beachfront. Another good option for sea swimming, as well as a few nice options for lunch here too, including Koru Cafe and the Boat Shed Bar and Grill. Away from the water, the island has 2 historic airfields dating back to World War II, built by the United States, and it is also home to the oldest church in the Cook Islands. The oldest church in the country because Aitutaki was the first island in the country to convert to Christianity, under the auspices of John Williams, who gave 2 Tahitian preachers the mission to convert the island in 1821. The Cook Islands Christian Church is at the southern end of Rarotonga on the west coast's main road. Oh, and one last thing about Aitutaki. I should probably have said this at the start. When you step off the tender at Rarotonga Harbour, the main wharf, be sure to stand on Visitors' Rock. It's easy to miss this cultural custom, but it holds significance here as part of an age-old tradition where visitors are welcomed to the island by standing on this particular rock when you arrive. So don't miss your opportunity to stand on Visitors' Rock, symbolic of the warm welcome from the local community and their wish that our stay with them be a meaningful and memorable experience. Now on to Rarotonga, the largest and most populous of the Cook Islands. Topographically very different from the almost atoll of Aitutaki, Rarotonga is a volcanic island. It's got 3 harbours, but no inland water. Also part of the southern group of 9 islands, Rarotonga is about 137 miles, or 220 kilometres south of Aitutaki. And again, it really is a day in nature that awaits us. Whether that's in the water, as warm as a bathtub, or on it, exploring the reef by boat, the piercing blueness of the seas here look like they've been painted on with neon paint. The whole island is wrapped with beaches, with top picks including Black Rock Beach on the western coast of the island, and Aroa Beach and Marine Reserve, which is great for snorkeling and sunbathing on the sand. On the southeast of the island, Muri Beach is a hub for water sports and other fun activities out on the water and offers sea scooter safari tours and lagoon cruises. If you're staying in the town, the island's capital, Avarua, is just to the east of where ships tender into. The town, though undeniably small, has the Cook Islands Library and Museum, which is open Monday to Saturday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. The museum is run by volunteers, and it tells the story of the region for a small entrance fee. As a final idea, take the bus the entire way around the island. There's only one bus route on the island, and it goes all the way around, so you can safely get on the bus anywhere, safe in the knowledge that it'll get you back to town. Technically, there are 2 bus routes. One goes clockwise, the other goes anti-clockwise, but the road is the same ring road either way. An all-day bus pass costs about 10 New Zealand dollars, or a single adult fare costs about 5. Now, you might be wondering why the price is in New Zealand dollars. Well, while the official currency of the Cook Islands is the New Zealand dollar, they do also have their own currency that is only spendable in the Cook Islands. It's called the Cook Islands dollar, and they only have one denomination. So I want to give you a heads up about a little Cook Islands treasure you might want to keep an eye out for when we're there. I'm certainly on the hunt for it. For some reason, they have a $3 bill. Introduced in 1987, this unusual denomination is unique in the world, and it's one of the most popular souvenirs to take home from a visit here. On the front is an iconic depiction of a local legend of Ina, who rode on the back of a shark to be reunited with her lover, Tinirau. And on the reverse, a traditional carving shows Tangaroa, the god of the sea, and a man rowing a canoe as the sun rises. In 2021, the note was given a polymer reprint, and it's such a special find that the International Banknote Society awarded the Cook Islands $3 bill Banknote of the Year the following year. There's a lot of treasure here in the Cook Islands, just waiting to be found. Sometimes by an overseas court trying to collect payment from an apparently assetless multimillionaire. Sometimes for a green-fingered recluse looking for a heavenly solace from the hectic hassles of the modern world. Sometimes people find treasure here that they didn't expect to find or didn't even know they were looking for, as in the case of William Masters and his happy harem, or the 24-year-old Tom Robinson so delighted to see land after 5 months rowing solo at sea. Whatever you find, in the Cook Islands or anywhere, I hope that the metal detector in your heart or mind can recognize it for the treasure that it is.